I'm Susan McGinnis with Clean Skies News. I'm in Pittsburgh at the G-20 Summit. I'm joined now by Angela Anderson, who's the Climate Change Program Director at the U.S. Climate Action Network. Angela, great to see you here.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Tell me your impression of the G-20 Summit. As far as your expectations, did you think they could have done more?
Well, we were really very hopeful. You know, this is the first time that finance ministers and the G20 have taken up climate change as a primary issue. And they did it because President Obama at the G8 meeting in Italy and what is called the Major Economies Forum, they agreed that this was a good forum for the finance ministers, the guys who control the money in these countries, to talk about what we need to do to address climate change.
So the president said, I want to see something delivered in Pittsburgh.
He did. He said, we want them to come back to us with recommendations. And we know that they did some discussion. They've done some study, essentially. They went to school. That was good. But they didn't really finish their homework. What we understand came out of the meetings was a decision to keep talking, to look at what some of the sources of finance for the new technology that's needed to move us away from fossil fuels and into a less polluting environment might be. But they didn't make any real commitments as to what their work plan's going to be, what kinds of sources they're going to be looking at, when are they going to finish their work, for example, and how are they going to take care and come up with the money for those countries that are going to be most impacted by the effects of climate, drought, sea level rise. These are all very real, immediate impacts, and they're going to cost money.
And so many of the ensuing talks are going to be the UN climate negotiations, and you were saying that you really need to have these finance ministers at that table.
Absolutely. There's got to be a lot of back and forth between the climate and environment ministers in each country and the finance ministers, because jointly they're going to have to figure out how do we raise the sufficient resources, how do we find the investments for the new green economy, and how do we manage that money. So the finance ministers are new to the table, but they're really important, and I think they're welcome in this conversation, but they've got a lot of catching up to do, and they have to do it before December.
Would you say the major issues on the table are the fossil fuel subsidies to be phased out, agreement still yet to come, they're sort of set to agree, financial mechanism, what kind of fund will be set up for developed nations to support developing nations,
right?
And hard emissions targets that we heard China and Japan talk about in New York last week.
Yes.
When will the U.S. and Canada step up?
Right. Those are all exactly the right questions. The fossil fuel subsidies are a good step in the right direction. Doing that in the medium term, again, probably need to do that faster. If you're going to use that either as a source of finance or a source of emission reductions, midterm is a fuzzy term. That probably means mid-century. That's just not fast enough. But that's a good start, and it's the kind of thing. There are lots of ways that they can raise money for climate finance that doesn't have to put a burden on business or on taxpayers. Things like taxing or putting a levy on the emission reductions that they promise to make anyway. You can generate, just like the cap and trade system in the United States is pledged to set aside some resources for new investment. You could do that internationally as well. That's just one of many ideas that have been kicked around. But they didn't really get into those details, and that's what they're going to have to do between now and December.
But you are pleased that climate change is getting a larger seat at the table?
Absolutely. These ministers and the heads of state really are, the leaders of these governments are the only ones who can really make the decisions and change the policy in their countries so that we can address the looming crisis that climate change is.
And the biggest thing you think that was lacking out of these meetings these 2 days?
Probably intensity. There was a new report that came out by the United Nations Environment Program this morning that said that what we're seeing already on the ground in countries proves that global warming is here, it's happening faster than we thought, and all those impacts we thought were far in the future are coming quicker than we thought. They've just got to move a lot faster, and they've got to put real dollars on the table and real commitments on the table.
2 more sets of UN climate talks coming up, Bangkok and Barcelona. There may be another G8 or G20 meeting coming up, and we have some bilateral talks coming up with the US and India, US and China. By Copenhagen, do you see there being enough political, the climate for the political climate and the financial climate being there for solid results in December?
Look, they can make an agreement, and they can make a good agreement in Copenhagen. As you pointed out, there are lots of opportunities for talk, and these talks have got to produce real decisions. And the next few weeks, all of those meetings, and there's one more that's really important, and that's the Major Economies Forum that President Obama has initiated. 17 of the world's largest economies and biggest polluters have made a November 15th commitment for technology technology roadmaps, as they call them. That's key to investment in the new technology and the new economy. And if they meet that deadline and they come up with the financing for those technologies and the financing for adaptation, then they can get a good deal in Copenhagen, as long as they also keep their eye on the prize, and that is reducing emissions at the level science says we need to do.
It sounds like a tall order with the given time frame.
They got a lot of good meetings and a lot of time to do it, but they're very close. And the problem is they're just not taking the opportunity to make decisions now. There's just a big game of chicken going on between these countries, and it's time to stop playing games and get serious and make commitments.
But do you see the momentum growing now, since we have a Senate bill coming out next Wednesday and this fuel subsidy agreement? Do you feel like the momentum that had been stalled is back on track?
Oh, absolutely. I think this was a really important week. It was a turning point, I believe. The UN meetings getting over 100 heads of state talking. And if you looked at not just the day of climate discussions, but the next day, the General Assembly meeting, climate was a very big priority in their overall state of the world discussions. So that's really important. And what those heads of state now have to do is to instruct their finance ministers, their climate ministers, to get the deal done.
Okay. All right, Angela Anderson, U.S. Climate Action Network, thank you.
You bet, thank you.
And I'm Susan McGinnis at the G20 Summit in Pittsburgh.